Hello and welcome to episode 1 of Inside the Huddle here on the Bubbs on Sports YouTube channel. Today is Sunday, February 25th. Hope you guys is doing well. We've got a lot to get into today. The NFL offseason is flying by. Free agency is right around the corner. Then you've got the NFL draft in April. And then shortly after that, you'll have all the mini camps, OTAs, and stuff like that. So surprisingly, I thought this would be a long offseason. But right now, it's flying by. We're almost out of February. As always, joining me is DiMari. DiMari, how's it going, man? Looking forward to getting into all the news and the latest around the NFL.
Yeah, I'm good. We got a new name, new brand, like you
Yep.
just said, Inside the Huddle. So we got some good news for, I guess you can say, our first start of the new show.
Yep.
It only took 4 days for some major moves, I guess, within the
Yep.
NFL. So, let's get into it. First day of Inside the Huddle.
Yep, definitely. Looking forward to talking all things NFL throughout the offseason. You can find this every single weekend. Of course, during the regular season as well. We'll have a lot of content up. We've been on throughout all last regular season, plus a couple weeks here into the offseason. And now new name, new brand. Looking forward to continuing this. And lots of stuff to get into today on the podcast. So we'll open things up in Chicago with the Bears and Justin Fields. There's been some reports that it looks as if Justin Fields' time as a Chicago Bear might be coming to an end. Some stuff hints on social media. You've also just heard some reports. This has been a big story really since the season ended, kind of wondering what would happen with Justin Fields and the Bears overall at number one. What would they do? Would they take Caleb Williams? Would they take a quarterback there? Would they go out and take Marvin Harrison, trade the pick, build around Fields? All of those kind of questions. It seems as if now they're in that direction of moving on with Fields. I'll be honest with you. I would like to see them hang on to Fields. I think it's actually better for them to hang on to Fields. Just me. I don't think there's a lot of people that in the NFL that agree with that, but how do you see this situation? Because I actually don't think it's a bad idea for them to build around Fields. I thought Fields showed a lot of good things. And I thought when you saw him with DJ Moore, a legitimate number one receiver, legitimate talent, he was able to do some good things. What was your overall opinion right now on this situation in Chicago?
Yeah, I've been advocating for Fields all year. I mean, I don't see the point of moving on from him. I think we talked a little bit earlier in this season where and I know I definitely wrote an article on the Bears and what they should do. And I kind of used the analogy of if the Bears are a Honda Civic right now as a team, if you and the team has four flat tires, if you
Yep.
take Justin Fields out of that and you throw some LED lights on that car with Caleb Williams, it still has four flat tires. Like it's still not going to move. So, like you just perfectly said, with DJ Moore and Justin Fields, we've seen some games where we're just like that duo can be great for a very long time. And also consider, I mean, DJ Moore did not have a solid, reliable wide receiver two on the other side of him. I believe Darnell Mooney was that next guy in line behind DJ Moore. And as you can see, there's been some reports he might not even be returning to Chicago. So that kind of says everything about the direction of the receiver core, where there's only one guy they trust right now. But kind of just looking at Fields, it's hard to grasp what they want to do and what's going on inside the organization, because not this season that just passed, but year before, I believe we're talking around week 6 or 7, they played Dallas to be exact, and they go, even though they don't win that game, but I think they march into Dallas and they end up scoring like 39 points, and everyone's like, oh, Fields is here, and this team is going to be great. And that stretch of games from like week 6 or 7, whenever that was, to the end of the year, it's like, okay, we see what Fields can do. Then it goes into the offseason, and it's like, oh, he might be an MVP candidate. Like, he might be one of the best quarterbacks in the NFC, in the NFL. We get a few weeks in, and we're looking at a team with a struggling offensive line, no reliable weapons out of DJ Moore, even though Cole Kmet did have a great year, a below average running game. I know a lot of guys missed time. Khalil Herbert definitely missed some time through their starting back. But I mean, Fields missed, I believe, 4 games and was leading rusher with 500 yards. So that's more than just your quarterback right there. And there's just a lot of issues the Bears kind of need to fix. And I just don't see throwing Caleb Williams into that mix will make it any different. I feel like it might be another Carolina situation, not as bad because he's a lot more gifted than Bryce Young is, but it wouldn't make sense for the Bears to kind of move on from Fields, considering everything around him is terrible.
Yeah, I totally agree. I thought Fields showed a lot of really good things this year, and he did a lot with nothing. You mentioned you really nailed it with the part of it where he led the team in rushing yards, and that's something else too. They had no running backs this year. Khalil Herbert, they had Dante Foreman there for a little while. They had no running backs. Like these aren't. Caleb Williams is going to come in here and all of a sudden turn things around, and they're going to win 12 games and be a playoff team next year and win the North. Especially when you look at that division. That division is only
Absolutely.
getting better. Where you've got the Lions, you expect them to be a contender again next year, and of course we saw what Jordan Love and the Packers were able to do in just year one this season with him starting at quarterback. So, I could definitely see it being one of those Carolina things. And the coaching aspect as well. Like Matt Eberflus, I don't have a ton of trust in him. I don't, just from an outside fan. I know a lot of Bears fans don't. It is not crazy to sit here and say that if Caleb Williams comes in here, they win 5 games next year, let's say, and Matt Eberflus is fired, they blow the staff up, they blow everything up. Now, all of a sudden, you're hurting Caleb Williams's development because then you're stunting his growth because you got to bring in a whole new coaching staff, a whole new offensive staff, and now all of a sudden he's got to learn a whole new scheme. So there is that risk of it as well, where potentially if they bring him in and it's a 1 year or a 1 year thing with Eberflus, because rookie quarterbacks, not every day are you going to see a rookie take their team to the playoffs. If they win 5-6 games, good chance people get fired. Good chance then you're learning a new system in year 2, and all of a sudden that's where big issues become, and that's what happened in Carolina. So I just think too, like Fields gets a lot of hate. This guy was on his way to a career year last year. He only played 13 games. He missed those, the 4 games as you mentioned. Had the highest completion percentage of his career up to that point. He had 16 touchdowns. He was well on his way to a career high in touchdowns. It seems like he's gotten better each year. And I understand, I feel like some of it's just that 2021 draft class as a whole, that quarterback class, because nobody panned out.
Yeah.
And, outside of Trevor Lawrence, but even him has not been anywhere close to the label people put on him as a generational talent. They collapsed this year. But this is a guy that a year ago, everyone talks about Lamar Jackson being this great rusher. A year ago, Fields rushed for over 1,000 yards. He can do it with his legs. He showed some things with his arm. I'm not saying he's a Hall of Famer, but this is a guy that they won, or they found ways to win some games last year. They won 7 games last year. You give him a running back, you give him a better offensive line, you give him Marvin Harrison Jr., and let's say Joe Alt. I mean, it's not crazy to say that team can win 10 games, right?
I agree. And, kind of to your point with again last year, not the season that just passed, but the year before, I believe they broke the franchise record in like rushing yards in a season by like a Chicago Bears team. So, I mean,
Mhm.
perfectly how we just mentioned it. They did not have a running back for majority of the season. And when Fields got hurt, the backup, I can't remember his name exactly, but we watched some games because they had some primetime games, unfortunately, that us fans had
Yeah.
to sit there and watch. But we seen how teams kind of prepped and like played the Bears where it was kind of just let's stack the box and let's force you to throw the ball and we kind of don't care. So I mean, that just shows you the type of situation that Fields was dealing with where he's forced to drop back and throw the ball 30, 40 times, which is what the Bears really don't want. But to kind of go on to your point about the 2021 draft, and I agree. In a way, I kind of feel like Patrick Mahomes kind of messed up football. Like, it's going to sound crazy, but I say this just because everyone is expected to step in, just
Yeah.
have instant success as a starter. Like that is not what it's going to be. I know CJ Stroud did it this year, but it's more than just lands on the quarterback. It's how can the coaches get him prepared? How can the front office get him prepared? How about the guys around him? Like, are they willing to help, find success in the team? We Teams take these quarterbacks very high, obviously, to teams with like a less fortunate situations. And they're like, hey, we need you to go out there. We need you to win 11 games in your first year. Like, it's not going to work like that. But again, I know Mahomes did sit for a few years behind Alex Smith, but him stepping in as a starter and getting successful instantly, I kind of feel is kind of just tweaking with the minds here of some impatient football fans and fans of their teams because everyone's not Mahomes. I mean, you got to give some guys some time. I mean, Fields is going to what, year 4, I believe. So if after this year, if I see there's no progress and there's no success, then maybe they consider, all right, let's move on. Let's go another direction. Or maybe the Bears look at themselves in the mirror and say, let's look at every team we put in front of them. Let's look at the teams in the division, the teams in the NFC. Does our rosters match up with the rest of those rosters? And then you focus on, can your quarterback win? but it's going to start around all the guys around him, just not in the center with the quarterback. That's the issue.
Yeah, and that Mahomes point is spot on as well. Everybody now that comes out of the draft, everybody's like, "Oh, next Mahomes. This guy could be the next Mahomes." People are saying about Caleb Williams,
Yeah.
generational talent, next Mahomes. People said about Trevor Lawrence about being the next great thing. I mean, geez, there was people that saw Zach Wilson make a couple throws in shorts and say, "This guy is the Mormon
A legend.
Mahomes. Watch out, watch out." You know that really happened. He tore it up. Um, but yeah, like I don't know. I just think the 2021 draft has that just stink around it where you feel all these teams outside of really the Jaguars are kind of moving on and turning things around. Of course, you see Mac Jones most likely out in New England, or even if he's there, he's not going to be the starter. You see Zach Wilson out in with the Jets or going to be. Um, you saw obviously what happened to Trey Lance. Outside of Trevor Lawrence, most of those guys are out. With Fields, it's almost like, all right, just move on from that 2021 class and get it right here. But I just, like we've said, I just can't see a world where this team, they were able to win 7 games this year with all the issues, where they give them a solid running back. Even if you give them Devin Singletary, let's say, they go on, let's say, bring in Devin Singletary. That'd be a monster upgrade over the Khalil Herberts of the world and the guys that were running there last year. You give him Marvin Harrison Jr. and a solid offensive tackle and a running back. I mean, Marvin Harrison Jr. and DJ Moore, you're winning 10, 11 games. That's just the way I see it. And,
Yeah.
taking
Yeah.
that other leap, and maybe he plays a full season too. He hasn't played a full season yet, which I know is a concern, but let's see what he can do over a whole 17 game slate. He hasn't been able to do that yet. He was on pace last year for well over 20 touchdowns. If he would have played a whole 17 game slate, which would have been the first time in his career he did that, but I don't know. I just think they're in a division where it's tough to say that they can, like with Caleb Williams, it feels like they would almost be resetting a little bit after all these years of losing. Like, I feel like this is their closest opportunity in a way. I don't know if that makes sense, but
Yeah.
to
I
potentially go out
agree.
and win 10, 11 games.
Because and something that you kind of said earlier, where you were saying if they do bring in Caleb Williams and they start losing, what do they do?
Yeah.
And what we kind of see in that situation a lot too, where teams are in year 2 or 3 and they're not winning with a new quarterback, then it's kind of just like, all right, well, let's go ahead, let's just ship all our superstars off and let's try to get some draft picks and just rebuild from the ground up. Is
Yeah.
Chicago putting themselves in a situation where that might happen, where 2 to 3 years, Caleb Williams and the Bears aren't doing anything, just another Justin Fields situation. And they're kind of just like, well, DJ Moore, you're unhappy here, and we don't want you to just be wasting time here with us. So let's ship you off somewhere and get some picks. Then once again, you just took a step back and you are hurting the team more than you're helping it. So in this case, I think we are both spot on. Where it's like you just stick with Fields. You get Marvin Harrison Jr., which is who I think they
Yeah.
should take with their first pick. You get some offensive help as well. You still, go attack free agency, even though you might not be able to sign all the big names. But I mean, I'm going to look at it from a receiver standpoint. Like you just said, DJ Moore, Marvin Harrison Jr., you throw somebody in the slot. It does not have to be anybody amazing. I mean, random name, Braxton Berrios. I don't know. You throw in like a Braxton Berrios, somebody that is going to be consistent, a third down guy that you know what you're going to get out of them. I think you find success with the offense.
Yeah, and I think too their defense is, add a couple pieces there, but they've of course got Tremaine Edmonds. They also brought in Montez Sweat last
Montez
offseason,
Sweat is
extended
pretty
him.
good.
So they've got some pieces there, some young guys. I don't know. Yeah, I agree. I think we're both agreeing with this. Obviously, I think you bring a couple pieces, and two, they got Cole Kmet as well. Another guy, solid tight end, not great, not George Kittle, not Travis Kelce, but can make some plays and is a solid option and been there obviously now for, I believe he's entering his 5th season, which is crazy. It
Yeah,
feels like he just was coming out of
he
Notre
just
Dame the other
started.
day, but yeah. So yeah, it's definitely interesting, but it seems like I think this is safe to say. Do you think they will end up moving on from Fields and then we'll move on to some of the salary cap stuff? I think they will, but I don't think they should. I guess that's the prediction
Unfortunately,
part of it.
unfortunately, yeah. I mean, during the Senior Bowl, I read that I guess they were getting calls from a bunch of teams. So
Yeah.
I'm kind of seeing this Fields to Pittsburgh heating up or Fields to Atlanta. So I do think he will get moved on, and the Bears will regret that in a few years.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. I think he does as well. Pittsburgh could be an interesting team. like you mentioned, the Falcons. There's definitely some teams out there that would definitely take an
Yeah.
opportunity on him. A lot better than a lot of quarterbacks last year. I'll tell you, I would take Fields last year in a heartbeat. Um, so we got some news this week as well that the NFL is increasing the salary cap. It feels like every year they increase the salary cap, but they're increasing it again. So just some of the numbers here: 224.8 million was the salary cap in 2023. It is now up to 255.4 million, which means it is up a total of 30.6 million. And this is historic. This is the largest year-to-year increase that we have seen. Although I believe that probably in a couple years we'll be talking about more history at the salary cap, because it feels like every year it's only getting higher, and every year there's a new position group that's breaking records. There's a new player that's getting a record-breaking contract. That's just the way sports are going. The money continues to get higher and higher. So the Commanders still lead the league in cap space, but a couple teams definitely got a nice boost. A couple teams that were in the red are now up in the green in terms of cap space. No longer over the cap. What are your thoughts on this as the NFL continues to increase it here in an historic move?
Well, I'm just gonna look at it from a Cowboys perspective, where hopefully now they go out and spend some money. I know Jerry Jones kind of talked about being all in for a Super Bowl this season coming up. So there's a few guys, a few names I'm not going to mention that they kind of could move around to clear up some more cap space. I know there's kind of trying to restructure some deals here to move up some cap space, but Jerry Jones, there's a lot of guys out there, a lot of linebackers, some pretty solid running backs available, some pretty solid receivers available. So I mean, if you are really all in, like you say, you just got a boost in cap space. I hope you're gonna make the most of it, and don't be afraid to spend some money this offseason.
Yeah, totally. And just as you mentioned there, from a Cowboys perspective, of course, restructure still have to happen as well. So some of these teams, a lot of these teams, their cap number will actually even get better. And then two, from a Jet perspective as well, they're currently sitting now at 12.7 million, up a little bit. Um, I think this hopefully means that Bryce Huff could potentially get extended or re-signed. For a while there, it looked like he was on his way out. I still don't think he'll come back, but potentially here with the salary cap increase, it could increase the Jets' chances there of bringing back Bryce Huff, which I think would be great. And of course, restructure still have to happen. But even a guy like a Mike Evans, if they decide to bring somebody else in like that, Calvin Ridley, helps that aspect of it. Now, the Bills are still lowest. The Saints are. It feels like the Saints, it is wild to me. The Saints have been over the cap for ever, it feels like. And yet they still somehow find ways to make these moves. It's like the salary cap at times doesn't always
Feels
matter because these
fake.
yeah, it feels fake. Yeah, because these teams that are all over the cap every year, they're still finding ways to make moves, and it's like, they were over the cap last year and they gave that big contract to Derek Carr. It's like, how is
Yeah.
that possible? So um it's definitely interesting. And then the Commanders, of course, are all the way at the top. Titans, Bears, so they've also got some money, as we just talked about. Patriots, Colts are some of the teams near the top. Texans, I'm telling you, the Texans are going to have a
Mm.
huge offseason. It's going to be really exciting to see what they do. They're at 67.5 million right now.
I
Give
know
CJ
this
Stroud
this
all the weapons.
this might be a stretch. This is just imaginary, but
Mm-hmm.
Texans get Tank Dell back next year.
Yep.
You have Nico Collins. If I'm Houston, I will give Dalton Schultz the money that he's asking for. I know he was asking for some change, nothing too crazy, nothing to reset the market. Can you imagine if the Texans was just like, let's just go all out. Let's just throw Mike Evans in the mix of that with a second year quarterback who I think might be an MVP candidate next year. And then we got Nico Collins, Tank Dell, who has shown like they are very respected and are only going to
Yep.
get better. A receiver trio of those right there, Dalton Schultz, and doesn't matter who in the running back, just hand the ball off to whoever. That's gonna be a dangerous team.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun. I think maybe again, the offseason still has to happen, but is it crazy to say in terms of teams that can actually dethrone the Chiefs? And I was talking to somebody earlier this week about this. It was a pretty good debate. I think it's probably the Bengals, right? The best team. I think it probably goes Chiefs one and the Bengals, because the Bengals have already done it. Burrow's one of two quarterbacks to actually beat Mahomes in the playoffs. And I think you can make the case that the Texans are three if they make the moves they're supposed to make. Because the Bills every year they're good in the regular season, but they haven't been able to get over the hump on Kansas City. They're going to be a threat, but I don't know if you can consider them over Houston potentially. Houston might be like the second best chance to dethrone Kansas City in the AFC.
I think I agree. I know some people are gonna watch this and like, what about Baltimore and like you just
Yeah.
said, Buffalo? But with Baltimore, I just there's something about when they get into the postseason, and it's not a
Yeah.
Lamar Jackson thing. I'm not throwing it on Lamar. I love Lamar Jackson. It's not a Lamar Jackson thing. It's just they get into the postseason, and it's kind of like everything they did to get them to the playoffs. They kind of
Hmm.
shy away from that come
Yeah.
playoff time. We kind of been seeing that as a trend, and then you just hit it perfectly with Buffalo. Great during the regular season, even though they struggled this year. Playoff time, can't get it done.
No.
Kind of similar to Baltimore, and then Cincinnati. But what all three of those teams have in common, we're talking about, like you said, off season still has to start, but we're
Yeah.
talking about they're all probably going to be losing pieces here with Cincinnati. I know we said we're going to mention it later, but with T. Higgins and the franchise tag, and we will again discuss it later on here. They might lose Tyler Boyd, so we're taking Tyler Boyd out of the equation for Cincinnati. For Buffalo, Gabe Davis looks like he's out of there, like he's not coming
Hmm.
back. And I believe Odell's a free agent for Baltimore, who was a key
Yeah.
piece to the offense. I mean, he didn't have the an Odell like season, but still a
No.
key piece. So we're talking about three teams that are losing vital pieces to their offense, where they're gonna have to grab some guys, and those aren't offenses where it's kind of just like plug in and do as you do. It's kind of like, hey, we need you to be successful because the guys who were in front of you were great players and they helped boost the team like instantly. So I 100% agree where Houston could be the next one because they already got the guys. So you just
Yep.
go throw a seasoned vet in there who I mean is going to be a Hall of Famer, and you touch up the defense here and there, which I don't think the defense even really needs much. That defense was very underrated this year, but you just kind of get more around Stroud where now it's not again about position need, and we talked about it last show where it's just like teams. There's a few teams that just need to just throw in some extra depth for the fun of it, just in case somebody gets hurt, anything happens. And Houston's one of those teams, so they go get another receiver, which they could
Yep.
use, and then they just add some depth around every position. I do think they can dethrone the Chiefs.
Yeah, you wonder if the Texans might make like a push towards, obviously Higgins got tagged, which we'll get to here in a little bit, as you mentioned. But what if you tag and trade? They go after Higgins, maybe in a trade, bring in Higgins, Tank Dell. It's
I
exciting
mean,
times in Houston. I mean, I thought this year, I jumped on the Texans bandwagon this year. I was like, oh, they're gonna beat the Ravens. Watch out, here they come, and they got smoked. But it's all right. They're gonna coming back. They're gonna be a fun team. They're gonna be
I think
exciting
I think they're going to be. They can win 12 games next year. I definitely can
easily.
see it happening.
Yeah. Yeah, no doubt. They'll be a big threat. And two, back to Buffalo. Of course, Gabe Davis is out, but and I know it feels like the last two off seasons there's been talks about this, especially last year, but you wonder what the future of Diggs is, you know?
Diggs to
You
Dallas.
want yeah, Diggs to
I'm
Dallas.
advocating Diggs to Dallas.
Diggs and CeeDee Lamb would be nasty. That would be
Absolutely.
nasty. Finally would give CeeDee Lamb some help, which he hasn't had.
Absolutely. And
But
had another time discussion for
yeah,
another time. But
yeah.
yeah, that would be a great duo.
Hmm.
Trio,
Yeah, the
bring it
Diggs.
to trio.
Yeah, that is true. Yeah. Yeah, the dig stuff is definitely something to watch for. Again, this offseason after another early exit. So moving on here to another AFC team, which is the Dolphins, and we'll get to the T. Higgins stuff here in a second. The Dolphins moved on from two guys this week, cutting two players. Emmanuel Agba and Xavier Howard are both out. The Howard thing was interesting because it actually hurt. It would hurt them against the cap if it wasn't post June 1st, which is weird that the way they did it. Um, but I don't know. I'll be honest. I don't know if the Dolphins the Dolphins are in an interesting spot. I guess I'll listen to hear your thoughts here first, and I kind of have a little bit of a bold prediction about the way this team is headed.
I mean, I don't know. I guess I seen that news break yesterday, and
Hmm.
I'm not really understanding, but then again I am because he has been injured, and they kind of want to bring in that healthy player that can be consistent that you kind of rely on. But I mean, you have Jalen Ramsey on one side, and you have Javon Holland behind you, Xavier Howard on the other side. Like we're talking about one of the better secondaries in all of football, and you just decide to just move on. Like I don't really get it. And like you said, with that being before June 1st, that kind of seems like one of those things where like, look, we just want you out of here. No,
Yeah.
like no disrespect to you, but we just want you out of here. Or they're just in very early off-season prep where they kind of know they got their eye in the draft, maybe who they might grab or some free agents they might try to grab or someone they might trade for. But I'm really not understanding Miami. I mean, this is a team 2 years in a row going into December looked like everything was perfect, nothing could go wrong. December comes and they kind of start to fall down that ladder a little bit, and now we're just releasing two guys that had major impacts for your football team. I'm
Mhm.
not too sure what's going on in Miami.
Yeah, it's interesting. Now, I think part of it with Howard is, he might be losing a little bit of a step. He is 30. He's going to be 31 at the beginning of the season, been in the league since 2016. I think that might be some of their approach. But yeah, the thing that just perplexes me is not having that pre-June or that post-June 1st designation to it. It only hurts them in cap. And it's like,
Yeah,
yeah, get out of here. He must have did something wrong. Like, get
yeah,
out of here.
had to because
It's
it's you
it's
never see
weird.
teams do that.
Mhm.
Like usually they're gonna wait, they're gonna hold off and move you after the first. But this was like they already had the U-Haul like kind of outside his house, and it's just like
Yeah. It's just
hopefully we don't
he's
play
out.
against you next season. It was
Yeah.
kind of weird.
Yeah, it's interesting, and it doesn't help the Dolphins cap at all. I mean, you look at their cap space, they're 27.9 million, and you have some thoughts about extending Tua. Like, where is all this money going to come from? They're in an interesting spot. Um, you mentioned that the normal collapse for Miami. That was a typical Miami collapse at the end of the year. It's a tradition for them. I don't think it's crazy. Maybe this is crazy to say in February, but this team, I don't think it's crazy to say they might not make the playoffs next year. Is that might be wild because you moved on from Howard already. You've got some cap space issues. And on top of that, they've got a lot of free agents set to hit the open market that are making big roles, are making made big or a big impact last year. Like Connor Williams, Robert Hunt, Isaiah Wynn, all on the offensive line are all set to hit the open market. And in Teron Armstead as well, could be nearing retirement. He might retire. So you're looking at potentially 4 new offensive linemen next year. Um, you saw that, have the Christian Wilkins stuff. You wonder with his whole contract situation. They just made these moves. Their cap space isn't very good. And when you look at the AFC, we just got done talking about Houston. Hypothetically, here for this scenario, okay, you look at the AFC and say Bengals are going to be good. We'll start in the North. Bengals will be good. Ravens will be good. Browns could be questionable. All depends on the Deshaun Watson stuff. But then you go to the South, you're going to say, okay, Texans are going to be a force. And then you go to the West and you're going to say Chiefs. Now, the East is definitely going to be the Bills. So, in this hypothetical scenario, let's say the Jets are good for this scenario and my own well being. Okay, the Jets are good next year. That'd be 6. You have then the Dolphins, Jacksonville, Cleveland, and the Chargers, let's say, fighting for that last spot. It could get interesting. It could get interesting. And you wonder, can Tua outplay Herbert? Can Tua outplay? I know he did this year, but if the Chargers get some things fixed on that defense, this might be a retool year, but I don't know. The Chargers are an interesting team, the way they're going to approach the season. If they're going to be all in on the playoffs or this is going to be more of a retool year. Let's see if we can get 7, 8 wins. And then 2025 is our big year. But what are your thoughts on that potential little bold take here? Early, very early, but just goes through my mind.
Well, I'm gonna just touch on all four real quickly here. With the Chargers, we talked about it last show. They got four guys in Williams, Allen, Bosa, and Mack that take a huge chunk of money
Yeah.
in cap space. So they might be moving on from two of those guys there, and then they're in the market for another running back. I don't think Austin Eckler's coming back.
Yeah.
So it's not the most sunny situation for the Chargers right now. With
No.
Cleveland, 100% agree. I mean, this team looked better without Deshaun Watson. So what does Cleveland want to do? They are getting Nick Chubb back next year. And how are they going to kind of come into this offseason where they know the season wasn't a fluke, but it's like Cincinnati's going to be back. Burrow is healthy. The Ravens are obviously still going to be good. And if Justin Fields ends up in Pittsburgh, we are in a dogfight just to even get the third,
Yeah.
the third spot in the division. Cleveland's going to get better this year. With the Jaguars, I mean, they had a collapse too that
Yeah.
was Miami. Like I think they were 8-3 in first place in the entire AFC, and then just everything kind of they figured out how to play football in Jacksonville, I
Yeah.
guess. they're going to figure it out. And I know Calvin Ridley is kind of up for a contract and he's a free agent. They will be getting Christian Kirk back. Evan Ingram had a great year. I don't I don't see Jacksonville being as bad as they were this year. They're only going to get better. I think Doug Peterson, something about him in his third year as a coach in a system, like takes the team up here. Jacksonville is not going to do what they did again last year. So if you're Miami with everybody that you have as a free agent, and you just perfectly said it, where the whole thing for Miami, especially this year, has been protect Tua, and you have to bring
Yep.
4 new guys in there to protect Tua. I just don't see them being better than the Bills. I don't see them being better than the Jets. If the Jets kind of, do what they're supposed to do this offseason, I
Yeah.
don't see Miami making the playoffs next year. I
Yeah.
100% agree.
Yeah. They're in a tough spot. And you wonder, too, the whole Mike McDaniel thing. You just wonder if he's ever going to be able to win that big game. He hasn't been able to win the big game late in the season. He hasn't been able to win the big game in the playoffs or the big games in the playoffs. He hasn't even sniffed the real big game. But there's definitely some of those concerns there. And too, like Buffalo owns them. Like Josh Allen owns them. So they're not winning the division. And then with the Jets being better, like the Jets, look, I don't know. I am very, very, very tempering my expectations on the Jets. But if they can get right, they got Aaron Rodgers. It's not crazy to say if Aaron Rodgers at the top. Aaron Rodgers at 90% of what he's been, he's better than Tua. He can outplay him easily. So,
Absolutely.
and into the Colts. Colts are another team. Now I know they're gonna have Anthony Richardson, but they're another team too that was right on the doorstep this year. They beat Houston in that game. They're in the playoffs. So they're another team too to be put into conversation. And maybe the Broncos with Zach Wilson. Maybe they make a run. We'll see. um, that is not happening. Definitely not happening. I know that for sure. That is not happening. But who knows? One day maybe it will happen with Denver and Zach. But yeah, it's gonna be interesting. But these are definitely some interesting moves, and their offensive line obviously needs a lot of help. And they'll look at some of that help. Maybe Jackson Powers Johnson in the draft, Guyton. There are some options there, but don't love where Miami is at. So moving on here to back to a little bit more about the salary cap stuff, free agency stuff. The tag was placed on T Higgins, 21.8 or 21.8 million fully guaranteed. You think he sticks in Cincy here? Or you think they stick around, or is it a potential tag and trade situation?
I don't know. I mean, I don't know how true these reports were that he was unhappy with the tag. Well,
Yeah.
I guess I can believe it. What player is happy with the tag?
No.
Where he was
Yeah.
unhappy with the tag, but I mean, looking at it from a monetary thing, I mean, he's making some money off this one year alone, but he doesn't want to get in a situation. Every guy that is tagged, where it's like,
Yeah.
I don't want to have this tag on me, and I'm only guaranteed 1 year, and I get hurt, and you perform without me, and it's kind of like, all right, well, now we don't need you, and then I'm moving on. Like he wants that security and that trust from Cincinnati. So I don't see them tagging and trading them. I think they still have the opportunity to try to work out a long term deal. Will it get done? I don't know, but I don't know the thing with T Higgins. Is it more about winning, getting the money, or is it about just does he want to be the number one? Does he want to be a number one receiver? Which
Yeah.
I kind of heard was a thing, and I mean, I think there's probably 25 teams that T Higgins will go to right now and be the number one option.
Oh, yeah.
But he is finding success over there with Cincinnati, so I guess it's kind of just his headspace of do I care to make more money, which doesn't seem like he's that type of guy. You never really hear much bad press about him, but I think it's like I just said. I just want somewhere I know I'm locked in, I'm secure for 4 to 5 years, and I can help this team win. And he wants to do that in Cincinnati. So hopefully Cincinnati are smart and they do give him a long term deal because with the cap space probably going up another $30 million next year, and Jefferson and CeeDee Lamb and Jamar Chase, I believe, needs an extension next year. They're just not going to have enough money for T Higgins, so they got to get it done this year.
Yeah, the window to win right now for Cincy's like right now. And we knew this
Yeah.
a couple years ago when they got to the Super Bowl. Like those were their big years. These are like their core years where everybody's still under their entering the league contracts before they all get the extensions. Of course, Burrow did, and then now Higgins, and you've also got Chase, of course, will be looking for one. But yeah, I totally agree with your point. It seems like where he's at right now in his career, um, He's 25. He's going to be, or he's going to be 25. He's entering his 5th year. Like, this is right now the prime of his career. I think he wants that.
Absolutely.
I'm the number one receiver and I want to get paid like a number one receiver. I don't want to be in the shadow of Jamar Chase my entire prime of my career. And I think that's part of it too. And I think that's why you could see him out and maybe potential tag and trade, especially maybe after this year, especially because they're probably going to prioritize Jamar Chase over T. Higgins, no doubt. Like next year, they're going to be all about extending Chase over Higgins. Higgins will hit the open market again. But yeah, I mean, if you go through some of the teams, like you mentioned, there's a lot of teams in the NFL where Jamar Chase or T. Higgins would be the number one receiver on their team. There is a lot of teams, a lot of divisions too. You know, we talked about Houston. He'd come in right away and be that number one target for CJ Stroud. You just look around to Kansas City, he'd be the number one. I mean, there's a lot of teams. You look at Denver, he'd probably be the number one. The Colts, depending on what happens with Pittman. Jacksonville, most likely with Ridley being out. So there's a lot of teams, especially in the AFC, that he'd be the number one. So it'll be interesting. But what do you think if he does get traded is like the most intriguing destination, just from like a fan's perspective, to see what he could do? I think it's probably Houston.
I'm going to say the Chiefs. Now that you kind of threw
Chiefs,
that one
yeah.
in there, I mean, he would probably be the most hated person to ever step foot in Cincinnati again.
Yeah, that
But
is true. That is
the
true.
Chiefs are, I don't want to say desperate. They're just coming off a Super Bowl, but we say this every week, it seems like. That's the worst team Mahomes will ever have to play with, and the least talented and productive group of receivers that Mahomes will ever play with. So, I mean, if the Chiefs want to get a little fancy here, they know Kelsey's kind of getting towards the end of that career there. You want to put Rasheed Rice under T. Higgins' wing and, let them kind of rock out as that 1 and 2 duo. And I guess rely less on Kelsey. That can be an interesting team.
Yeah, it would definitely be a team that would be right in the conversation to win three straight. And a potential T. Higgins Cincinnati battle in the AFC title game would also create a whole lot of storylines there. So that's also a good one as well. But certainly a couple AFC contenders there could be in the market for Higgins if tag and trade does occur here. So two more quick topics here before we close things out. There's been some reports on Dak Prescott looking to reset the quarterback market. Now, of course, these are things that are still fluid, not happening right this second, but something that could happen here more towards the future. What are your impressions on the Dak Prescott contract conversations here?
I think he deserves it, and I hope he gets it. Looking at the quarterbacks available, I mean, I know it's always going to be the talk of what can he do in the playoffs and the playoff record and
Yep.
this, and that. And I think a lot of people kind of forget that winning a game in the NFL, let alone the playoffs, doesn't really just come down to the quarterback. I mean, that's coaching, that's the defense. And Michael Parsons said it earlier on the podcast, actually a few weeks ago, where he's kind of like everyone's talking about Dak this and Dak that, but let's not forget that the defense gave up 40 points.
Yeah.
I think he was talking to Stephen A, and Stephen A was like, "Well, Dak threw a pick six," and he's like, "Okay, even with that pick six, I mean, we're still talking about we gave up 40 points. They scored 48. You take the pick six away, we gave up 40 points at home in the playoff game. Not all on the quarterback, but kind of just what I like to tell people outside of Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson, Justin Herbert, if you want to throw it in there, and Josh Allen, who would you be able to bring in to that offense to go win the Super Bowl for Dallas? All those guys are locked in.
Yeah.
There's nobody else you can bring in. So I mean,
Mm-hmm.
and the 60 millions kind of is not what about it is, but then again, it's not really Dallas just throwing the money at Dak and they're kind of just like, here, just have it. It's like, hey,
Mm-hmm.
we need money for the long term. We need that cap to not be so bad. Because I think that cap hit this year alone is 59 million.
Yeah.
And they're supposed to be going all in. So this is more about the future. I mean, we can talk about he's on year 8 and he hasn't did this and he hasn't did that, but there's not a lot of guys better than Dak Prescott in the NFL right now. And I do think that he's deserving of his 60 mil, which could only be for this year, and then they can go into next year and try to reconstruct again and
Yep.
stretch that money out a little more. So, I mean, for the ungrateful Dallas fans that are kind of
Yeah.
stubborn and have seen a quarterback win 12 games the last 3 years. I've seen some bad years with Dallas. I know my dad has definitely seen some bad years with
Yeah.
Dallas. So let's be grateful for the quarterback that we got, and let's just give him the money that I think he deserves. He's coming off an MVP year. and just go from there. Let's stop with the hypotheticals and who we can possibly bring in to fix it. Give him his money, let him prove what he's worth, which he's already done, and that's it for Dallas.
Yeah, it's so funny hearing some of these fan bases. I even, Buffalo fans too, when they were complaining about Josh Allen. I'm like, please, you want to watch bad quarterback play? Watch us for a couple weeks, and then you'll get bad quarterback play. I'd give up a lot
No,
to have Dak
like
Prescott type play since
I
2016.
just I don't get it. I mean, no disrespect to any fan bases here, but like I can be an Atlanta fan and wake up and base my whole day watching Desmond Ritter throw the football around. I
Yeah,
don't have to do that. I don't have to
yeah,
watch Jimmy G throw the football around. Like I am watching Dak Prescott, who has been successful in his career.
yeah,
And if we can talk about regular season quarterback, I can give you a list of regular season quarterbacks, but I guess we can talk about that at a different time. So I mean, the guy deserved it. I don't. It's because he plays for Dallas. We all know that,
yeah.
but this fan base is ungrateful. In a way, I kind of wish Dak Prescott would leave and let's go get JJ McCarthy and be stuck with him for a few years, and you will all regret when we have to play Dak Prescott twice a year while he's in the Commander's uniform, and he's and he's giving our defense 45 points each time we meet him. So there's my take on that.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, he was third in the NFL in yards, first in touchdowns, second in QBR. And I actually talked to a couple of people this week, like debating about where Dak stands amongst like the NFL in terms of rankings of quarterbacks. Everybody always talk if Dak was on any other franchise, everybody would be like, "Oh, he's so good. Look at him. He's
Perfectly
great. 12
said.
wins." But Dallas, of course, the media is so much hype high, and if you don't win in the playoffs, everybody's going to hate you and you're trash basically. But like Josh Allen, you look at all these quarterbacks, Josh Allen, let's look at Lamar. You look at Dak, they have all had the same playoff issues. They all have. Allen, everybody's like, oh, Josh Allen is so good, this, and that. Dak had a lot of better numbers than him, and they've all had the same playoff struggles. Same thing with Lamar Jackson, the same playoff struggles. In fact, I think Dak is actually better in the playoffs than Lamar is, and I think Dak's only played like one more playoff. I forget. I don't know the quite exact numbers, but um,
No,
what were you saying?
well, I was gonna say
I think
I
he's got
now
better
that
numbers, I know, but than Lamar.
Well, now that we're
Was
on the topic,
Yeah,
I didn't want to get on the topic, but now that we're on the topic, I guess I'll go ahead and air it out because you perfectly said it where it's all the same struggles in the playoffs. I mean, I think 2020 was the only time that Josh Allen really made it further than Dak Prescott.
yeah,
That's when they
exactly.
lost the AFC Championship, and Dak broke his ankle that year. And I mean, that
Mhm.
offense was on pace for historic numbers. I think that was the year they were talking about Dak Prescott might break every single record in like Cowboys history. They were falling behind by like 20 points every single game, but he
Yeah.
was putting up some crazy numbers, and that's I think the second worst defense we've ever seen in football. So kind of onto that point where I'm just gonna pinpoint some names here, and it's gonna sound a little biased, but I don't understand why we look at Justin Herbert's collapse against Jacksonville, where all they really needed for that game was maybe two 6-minute drives,
Yeah.
3 points, and you win that game. You were gifted, your team was gifted 4 turnovers, and you were up 27. So they blow that game, and everyone's like, "Oh well, Brandon Staley is terrible, and it's not Justin Herbert's fault, and let's rub Justin Herbert's back and let him know it's okay. We got next year." Because he blew a 27-point lead, even though your offensive
Yeah.
coach sucked. Yes. But then you got Mike McCarthy on the other hand, where who's in press conferences saying, we just weren't prepared to play. We kind of got out coached and we didn't know what to do when they did this, and that. And the defense gave up 48 points, and they're just like, oh, well, Dak, you suck. Like, pack
Yeah.
your bags and go to the USFL. You'd never deserve to play another snap. I don't get it. The same with Josh Allen. I mean, the defense giving up a touchdown in 13 seconds does fall on the defense. I 100% agree. But let's not act like just, I believe last year, not season that just passed, the year prior, that he was just in a all out dog fight with Skylar Thompson, who probably played like 3 snaps for Miami all
Yeah.
year. But everyone's giving him, well, you had an exciting game in 2020. You lost 13 seconds to
Yeah.
Patrick Mahomes. Like, no, like 2020 was forever ago. Like, we don't care about 2020. What has he done since that season? Love Lamar Jackson. What has Lamar Jackson did in the
Nothing.
playoffs? Nothing. And I
Mm-mm.
mean, this year for Baltimore, this team was first defensively in every statistic that they like. Of course, you're supposed to be good in the playoffs. You have the best defense in all of football. You got to be successful. Buffalo has better talent around Josh Allen. I don't care what nobody says, but I mean, I'm taking CeeDee Lamb over Stephon Diggs, but I mean,
Yeah.
Gabe Davis is way better than Michael Gallup. He's
Yeah.
way better than Brandon Cooks.
Hmm.
The
Yeah.
arguments, I'm really not just understanding it. I guess the 1 year I can probably understand Dallas probably should have made it a little further. I think it was 21. That's where you had Gallup probably had his best year. You had Amari Cooper, you had CeeDee
Yeah.
Lamb. But again, that was one of those games where they're kind of coming to the game. They're just like, we weren't prepared to play. We just got punched in the mouth, which has been the Dallas thing, where it's like, let's look so great during the season, but come playoff time, we're not prepared. But what they aren't understanding is teams want to be the one to beat the Dallas Cowboys. They want to be the one. The reason why the Cowboys are talked about in the negative light on these media shows, and Dallas comes out flat and they're not prepared.
Yep.
I just don't get it. I know I'm kind of rambling right now, kind of with everything going on with Dallas, but I guess my final say of what I'm trying to say is, outside of Patrick Mahomes, if we're being so honest, outside of Patrick Mahomes, there's not a quarterback in the NFL that you can tell me really deserves more praise than Dak Prescott, because nobody has done anything in the playoffs. You can say Joe Burrow, but I mean, with the talent around Joe Burrow, who won't be good in the Bengals
Yeah.
offense? Josh Allen might be. Sorry, Zach Wilson, same guy in my eyes sometimes. Zach Wilson might be good in that system with Cincinnati. You have two number one receivers, one of the better running backs in all of football. You have a great head coach that prepares his players and get the most out of his players, which is another thing going to the NFL. But I mean, yeah, outside of Mahomes, there's not really too many quarterbacks that deserve more praise and are way better than Dak Prescott, because everyone's doing the same thing at the end of the year, and that's losing to Patrick Mahomes in the playoffs.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. And yeah, you can make the case Dak is right up there with all of them, especially when you look at the numbers. As an MVP candidate again this year. Yeah, Burrow would be the only one I think that you could say, because he's gone to the Super
Yeah,
Bowl. Out of all those guys, he's the only one to actually get there and only one to actually take down Mahomes out of the AFC guys. Of course, Dak hasn't had the chance to play Mahomes in the playoffs because he's in the NFC. But yeah, so like out of those guys, it'd be Burrow. But in terms of the AFC, but yeah, all of them you can make a strong case. It's not crazy to say they've all had the same playoff struggles. And yeah, if Dak was on any other team, they'd all be getting praised just like Allen does, and just like Lamar does, and
absolutely.
Herbert. So, but yeah, you mentioned Zach in that Denver system should be watch out. We
Enough,
got a guy
enough
that
of
could
the
take them.
booze.
All right. So one more quick thing here to close things out. Gonna reveal the top six quarterbacks in the draft, and then some underrated guys and some guys we don't like. So who's your top six? And then I'll reveal top six.
I'm gonna go. I got it written up right here. Give me 1 second. But if I remember top of the head, I'm not too big on Caleb Williams, but I
Yeah.
still do think that he's probably the best prospect out of the other quarterbacks. Number two might be a little surprising. I like Bo Nix a lot. I mean, I remember watching Bo Nix at Auburn play Justin Herbert, and I'm just like, there's no way this guy's a starting quarterback for a Division One
Yep.
program. And kind of just seeing where he came along, I really like Bo Nix. I'm going to put Bo Nix at two. Give me Drake May at three. I have Jaden Daniels here at four. Five, I have Michael Penix. And then six, I know a lot of people are probably thinking JJ McCarthy, but absolutely not. I'm going to say Spencer Rattler, which I know is probably insane, but at least we've seen what he can do throwing the ball. I know he kind of has a lot of character issues, which I've heard about with him, but
Yeah.
from Oklahoma to South Carolina, he definitely did come a long way. He kind of just
Yeah.
needs to, I guess, continue to grow as a person.
Yeah.
And that's going to be my top six. I refuse to put JJ McCarthy up there.
Yeah.
I can't.
All right. So mine's a little bit different. I got Drake May at one. I don't like Caleb Williams. I like Drake May a lot. I think Drake May has the highest floor in this class. Um, he's got, I think, the least bust potential. He just is. I think Caleb Williams has probably got the highest ceiling in terms of his raw natural talent, but I also think you can make the case he's got the lowest floor. I don't know. Towards the end there in USC, you know, I just don't know if he's gonna be. I just don't know both on the field and off the field if he's quite built for the NFL. I just don't. I think some of the stuff at the end of the year was just a little concerning at USC. Really collapsed, did not look anything like the number one overall pick. Was making some really head scratching. It almost is like he just quit. It was almost like he was just like fast forwarding to the NFL draft, and I just didn't like that. So I'll go May at 1. I think he's got the least bust potential, highest floor. I'll go Will. I put Caleb Williams at 2. I'm not going to put any of the other guys. I think that's crazy. Although I think you can make, I probably could put all these guys in front of Caleb Williams, but I'll put Williams at 2. Although I don't think he's really going to work out in the NFL. Talked a little bit about earlier in Chicago. The rest of the list is tough for me. I have Daniels at 3, although I think you can make a strong case. I think you can make Penix at 3. I like his accuracy. I know sometimes when the first read's not there and he doesn't do a great job of handling pressure, but he gets into training camp, gets into a good staff. I think he can work on that, but some of these throws are phenomenal. So I'll put Penix at 3. Or I'll stick with Daniels at 3. I'll put Penix at 4. I like him a lot, like the accuracy. I like JJ McCarthy. I want to put McCarthy at 5. Now, I don't think some people think he should be a top 10 pick. I don't think JJ McCarthy should be a top 10 pick, but he's a winner. He wins. So I'll put JJ McCarthy at 5, and I'll put Bo Nix at 6. I think I like Bo Nix a lot, but I wonder really how good he can be. Like, I think he's solid, but all those years in college, I just wonder really how high his ceiling is. Like, I wonder if he's kind of just going to be plateau and be kind of okay. So I'll put Nix at 6. Some of my underrated guys, I really like Rattler. I would love to see if the Jets can try and get their hands on Rattler. I think some of the issues that he had in Oklahoma moving to South Carolina, some of the adversity he hit is really good for him. So I like Rattler, underrated. Michael Pratt, I also like. Jordan Travis, another guy. And then some guys I don't like. Like, I don't think Sam Hartman's going to do anything. I don't think Austin Reed and Devin Leary is going to do anything. Those are some late round picks. So that's my list. I'll go May, Williams, Daniels, Penix, McCarthy, Nix.
There is one name, and I believe he did declare, if 24 Sports here is correct with the rest of this list. I think Joe Milton is one that can be somebody you kind of sit for maybe 2 to 3 years and can be successful. I mean, he has a very big arm. He is athletic. And I
Good
know
size,
kind of
yeah.
at Tennessee, he really didn't get much of the recognition, I guess you can say, because it was a lot of Hendon Hooker, like, wow,
Yeah.
during his time at Tennessee. But again, with the arm talent of him and kind of just seeing what he did at Tennessee this year, I think that's somebody that if you want to take maybe round 4 or 5, which could be a little bit of a push, but let's just say very late 4, but 5 or 6, somewhere in those rounds,
Yeah.
you sit behind somebody for a few years. I think he can be somebody that's very good, because one thing you can't teach your quarterback really is just athleticism and
Yeah.
arm talent.
Mm-hmm.
So he has both. I mean, I remember watching. I think they were playing Virginia this year. I seen him throw like a 70-yard bomb, flat footed, kind of just
Yep.
flick of the wrist. He's one that can be very special. So I think I'm not gonna say a steal for whoever takes Joe Milton, but I think in a few years he could be a guy that we're kind of looking at. We're just like some teams kind of missed out on him.
Yeah.
I like Milton a lot.
Yeah, definitely a guy that I think, like you mentioned, sits a year. He's been a guy that I've looked at as potential mid-round pick for the Jets day 2, day 3. He's got all the physical traits, tall, lanky, good arm, athleticism. Like, those stuff you can't teach. That's all just obviously natural. And I think that's definitely something that gets him, get likes that. I don't think it's crazy to say that maybe some of these guys that are picks in the middle round could actually be better than some of these first round guys. I don't think it's crazy. I think you can make the case Rattler could potentially be better than, you can make a case Rattler could be better than maybe a Michael Penix, or even maybe could be better than a McCarthy after he sits for a little bit, but especially what he did at the Senior Bowl. But Michael Pratt's another guy. Some of these guys coming from the smaller schools, like Tennessee, South Carolina, those are big SEC schools, but there are some guys coming from these smaller schools. You wonder how they'll adjust to the competition, but it's a good class. It's a good quarterback class. So those are the top 6. Combine will be this week, so stay tuned for that. We'll have content next week about the Combine. Any other news to close things out? Any other closing thoughts here before we finish things off?
I'm just ready for the combine. That's it. Kind of
Yep.
see where a lot of these guys kind of look in their measurables and
Yep.
during the drills. And yeah, next week we can kind of get into some guys who kind of stood out during the combine,
Mhm.
or I think the combine might still be going on. next time we shoot, I think it's a
Yeah.
Friday, Saturday, Sunday. I could be wrong. I haven't really kept up with the dates this year, but definitely can get into some guys next week. And maybe we might see some draft stocks go up. Maybe some might go down. We will
Yep.
see.
Yeah, big time of year for prospects. Obviously, you got the combine, you got some pro days coming up as well. So looking forward to that. We'll have you all covered here. So stay tuned. A lot more content coming your way. As always, hope you enjoyed it. Please like and subscribe. And thanks for watching.